28 seconds.
27.
26.
25 seconds.
24. 23.
22 seconds.
21 seconds.
20 seconds. 19.
18.
17 seconds.
16.
15 seconds.
14.
13 seconds.
12.
11.
10 seconds. 9.
8.
7.
6.
6 what?
Copy.
5 seconds.
3, 2, 1.
Hello everybody, welcome to Subspace Chatter, where we boldly go into discussing Star Trek. Today we'll be discussing this week's episode of Prodigy, Preludes. Joining me today are a panel of other co-hosts. Let's go around and introduce ourselves, everybody.
Hi, I'm Vanessa, and I host a YouTube channel called I Love Bad Star Trek.
I am Scott. I am host of the YouTube channel Opinions No One Cares About.
I'm Dustin from the YouTube channel Best of Trek, Worst of Trek.
And I'm Robbie Sherman, host of Conversations with Robbie Sherman, and our good friend Dan, who is coming to us
somewhere
from
in the ether.
jolly old England. Our fearless leader. Thank you everyone so much for joining us today. As we left off from the last episode, we're still stuck in the neutral zone. Protostar has been out, but we're working on getting it fixed. And in the meantime, most of this episode is concerned with filling in backstory for all the crew and also filling in the Diviner's story and Essentia's place in the Diviner's story. And also a little bit of Janeway here and there. Does anybody else want to
And Chakotay.
yeah. Right. We get some Chakotay back in, yeah, which is nice. Of course, he's always underserved in every Star Trek franchise, but it is so fantastic to see him. All right, would you like to start kind of recapping points?
No, just get to the first question.
Yeah.
Okay. Why do people think that it's cute that Murph literally can't communicate meaningfully with the crew? Like, was there I'm so sorry. I got the wrong script. This has not come up properly. Forgive me.
Why would people think it's cute that Murph literally can't communicate meaningfully with the crew?
Oh, okay,
like what? They're a They're a tormented soul?
Yeah, like
Biggest damn tormented soul there is.
we can only go by their nonverbals. And when they were asked, what's your backstory, they just went, ah! And that was it. And it's like there could have been such a luminous, colorful backstory there. We're never gonna hear it, and everybody just laughed. Maybe they've been, kidnapped at birth, like snatched right out of the womb or whatever, and marooned onto this, planet with the Diviner and stuff, and another horrible circumstances like everybody else. But we'll never know. We'll never know. They will always have that misconnection.
Yeah.
They can't meaningfully communicate.
But they do seem to be able to understand when everybody's communicating with them, so there's something going on.
I think we're going to be getting that later, honestly. They're probably cut for time now. It's probably better to flesh out all these other stories and fill in the gap for our is this the season finale?
Dan says,
okay.
I'm going with a new theory. Murph will turn out to be Cisco.
Beautiful.
The
Excited for that. There's a lot of interesting dynamics at play there they can have fun with, and it'll be exciting to see how that turns out. But anyways, we're probably going to get that a little bit later on, actually. I bet they're probably using that as a joke for a while before it pays off into something really big. I think this show has a little bit more of a sense of humor than some of the other Star Trek series, and they're probably willing to play like such things like that off for a while before they actually like play, fully show all their cards.
He is an enigma wrapped in a riddle. I mean, we thought he was just sort of like a goober, and now he's a humanoid goober. and adorable still, but
Yeah. I feel like he's gonna
not
he's essentially a toddler at this stage.
and indestructible, which
Oh,
means
totally.
they should use him to defuse the weapon. I think.
Yes.
I still think he's gonna eat it.
Yeah, I think that's coming.
They have a really like I like that Dahl is like almost immediately taking credit for like fixing like the ship or something when it's been all of them like having to work around the clock to try to figure out what's going on.
Still a melanoid slime worm, but he's got arms and legs now and a head.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
You know.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
I think the actually the most interesting reveal was the Sedusa, the Medusan reveal. Yeah, sorry, Sedusa is the character from the Powerpuff Girls, and she is not related to the show. I've actually been more curious about the Medusan than Murph at all, because I kind of take Murph as like the kid joke character, and I think like there's a lot of like winking to the audience with Murph, whereas like the Medusan seems a lot more complex, and she doesn't even have a lot of explanation for her own origin story. She talks about just being, and I found that fascinating.
Is Murph less or more cute as a humanoid? I think more.
Oh, more,
more.
yeah,
And more.
Mhm.
Yeah.
you can
I guess
cuddle
I'm
with
the
that
only-
guy.
I guess I'm the only one going with less, mainly for the merchandise possibility. I more want that original Murph plushie than the new humanoid Murph.
Hey, don't worry, soon they'll have both for you.
I really can't wait for Uncanny Valley Murph, where it's like not
Yeah.
quite all the way humanoid, but just
I want
a
like
little bit off.
I want like McFarlane special Murphs that are like all like popular Star Trek characters, like a Picard Murph or a Captain Kirk Murph or a Uhura Murph, something that'd be fun. I like that.
How
I'd
do you
buy
do a
all
Murph
those.
Funko?
Waste all my money on them. What'd you say?
How would you do a Murph Funko? Like
I don't
original
know.
Murph, not humanoid.
Okay, I don't know. I guess you just make like, I don't know. It feels like it's going to turn really gross really quick if I describe
Just
that.
take a doll one and then melt him.
Yeah, I guess so. It'd probably look like a pile of something. But it would probably sell too.
Yeah.
It's amazing how much Funko Pops sell for. It's because of the vinyl.
I'm not going to tell you how many I have then.
Same.
Which character's pain do you think is the deepest here, everybody? Vanessa, do you want to lead us off?
Probably Gwen. She has the most sort of ethical conflict going on, and she's being hunted
Oh yes.
by her own world. I think I'm really excited to see what this leads up to, reuniting with her father, on what terms they'll be on, and will she remain loyal to the Prodigy crew? I would hope so. It seems like she's leaning that way, but it is a father, that she thought she lost. So I think she's the person with the most on her mind.
Right.
Justin?
Yeah, I think if the Diviner and Essentia, or whatever her real name is, catch up with her, I think maybe in the future there might be some coming back to the dark side for Gwen. As far as the question, though, I think I would go with Rock Talk, and not even so much because of the backstory we got this week, but the backstory from the other half of the season where she was alone by herself for potentially years.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Good point. Scott?
For someone that sorry, go ahead.
I think I would probably still give it to Dal, because It's not that long since he realized he's basically a genetic experiment, and he spent this entire time like trying to figure out what his species was. He's dreamed of having parents. Back the first half of the season, the Murder Planet like tried to use that against him by showing him visions of what looked like grown-up versions of him. And so he hasn't really had a lot of time to process that. Nope, none of that happened. You're just like a baseline human with some extra stuff thrown in.
Is anybody getting a little Max from Goof Troop vibes off of Doll?
Yeah, I can see that. I can totally see that.
Yeah. He's not like gross or like, I guess maybe that's the word I should use, like repugnant the way like Bart Simpson can be at his worst, or somebody like a Stewie, which, I mean, this show never goes that hard or anything. I'm just like basing it on like personality traits or something. But it's also like, he's still kind of like stuck up and full of himself, and he's a little like too cool for school to be like actually cool. It's very fun watching him mature as he becomes a captain and settles into his role, because he does a really good job at other instances, and then he like has the obvious flip up of taking credit for all the work that they pitched in on.
I think it's very indicative of him being a teenager. That this is a untrained teenager trying his best at being a captain, and also like Okana made him feel a bit insecure, so maybe he's overcompensating a little bit. But it's the rat tail that is like Max, right? Is the rat tail.
The rat tail, and then the like hair coming up, it makes me think of him wearing his backwards hat.
Oh,
so yeah. We are fans of a backwards hat on this podcast. I think so, anyways.
Got some kind of issue with backwards hats, Robbie?
Yeah, we are fans.
I couldn't find my Niners hat to go with this, or I would be wearing it backwards today.
Well, if you wore it backwards, we wouldn't know it was a Niners hat.
Yeah. I have a no hats policy personally, but I invite everybody to wear hats, including you, Vanessa.
I don't have a hat head. I think I need to have a hat head.
Yeah. I don't want to, like, I worry I'll go bald if I start wearing hats. Like, I hear that all the time from my family.
As far as Doll, every
please.
time he talks about being genetically engineered, does anybody else think of the Weird Al song, I think I'm a clone now? Yeah, every single time that the words to that come up, I'm not gonna sing it so we don't get kicked off here or whatever. But yeah,
that's a good one.
How did I guess I should look at this here. Do you think for episodes with so much backstory, for example, like First Flight, are best at the start of their respective series, or if it's fine to include them later in the show?
Huh?
I think it's better to include it. I'll explain it more. What it's saying is when you have a backstory episode, like First Flight from Enterprise, where Archer talks about the original Warp 2 flights and stuff like that, and you just get a backstory dump literally right before the Xindi arc starts. I both liked it there. I thought it was a perfect place in Enterprise, and this is pretty much the perfect place too. I figured this week we'd wind down a little bit after a two-parter, and it probably wouldn't have a lot of substance, but I was really glad to see this week that we both wound down a bit and we got some awesome substance. I think it was a perfect timing.
Yeah, I felt good about it. I'm perfectly okay with it. I like that we actually got all this backstory with the diviner and Essentia too. That was very fulfilling for me. I think this show is a little better at showing and not telling in the ways it needs to be. Like, we get just enough dialogue to fill us in. I think it's good for kids and people who are a lot older as well, because I don't think it meanders the way some other shows do in here.
One thing I did like is that apparently Essentia is actually the Vindicator. So it's like, oh, okay, so the Valnicat now name themselves by Time Lord rules.
Totally. Dana, do you have anything to comment, friend?
Dan's not truly with us.
Okay, I'm so sorry. So thank you for being with us, by the way, Dan.
I think I actually really I think in the beginning, if you do it too soon towards the beginning, you don't really care enough about the characters to want to know.
Yeah.
So I think it really depends on the story that you're telling. But at this point, we are very invested in these characters, and we really do want to know like what's up with them and everything. So I think it was perfectly done. I think waiting for a lull in the action makes perfect sense. You know, trying to like, all right, you know, with Disco, it's just sort of shoved in like somebody putting like papers into a backpack without looking into what folder it's going into. They just sort of jam exposition in there, just sort of haphazardly. And with this, it's like, okay, the ship needs to be repaired. All we're doing is literally sitting here talking. So let's talk about ourselves. That makes perfect sense.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, it reminds me a lot of the Community episode where they talk about like fake things that happened, and you don't get any real backstory, but it feels good because they have a good setup for why they're all stuck there. And like I totally feel okay with this setup. Like we have to let the ship, everyone's just kind of sitting on their thumbs because Janeway doesn't know why they're not contacting them or this or that. They don't even know why they went into the neutral zone and put them all in danger to begin with. So
I also like that. Oh,
please.
sorry, Ed.
Go ahead.
Oh, I was just saying I like that Janeway doesn't. I'm relieved that Janeway doesn't take the diviner's word at face value. I'm glad that she's, as I suspected, she would be very like suspicious of taking everything just as it is. Like these kids are evil; they're kids. What do you think of how Chakotay is being portrayed in Prodigy? I mean, we don't really. I mean, I guess it's noble of him to just, send the protostar back in time and sort of maroon himself there. So he's in a different, now we know where he is. He's in a different timeline. So, I think we don't really see too much of him. He's more of like in the thick of action and being captured and things like that. We haven't really seen him have to, God, go into like medicine wheels and all this other appropriative stuff. So I'm glad that they've avoided that. I really hope that they address the issues that came up with his character in the past. But, for now, it's just sort of he's a plot device, essentially. Yeah. So it would be really cool if we got to like get more acquainted with him and where he is now. I'm concerned about how they're going to portray his character, but so far he's the damsel in distress, I guess.
I really want to say that his model looks so good. Like the details on it, like it looks really good. I'm thinking like at this point in the series, everything just looks really good because they found a way to create good fluid movement with all the detail, not looking like it's lacking or something like that when you go into heavier shots. The last couple of episodes had particularly good animation. Yeah, it's been shaping up nice on that front.
Speaking of, like, what did you think of that art style in Flashback?
Oh,
that was beautiful. I
yeah.
liked it a lot.
Yeah, all good.
I thought so too.
As far as Dan's question, this week I found my biggest dislike was this convenience of why is it that Chakotay can send the protostar to the future, but they can't board it? That didn't make a lot of sense to me.
Yeah,
That's a fair point.
I think they have I don't know.
It felt like Michael Burnham sending her suit back in through the time portal after they got to the future. It's like, why? Why did you have to do that now? I'm confused. More than that, as far as his portrayal in the overall season, I agree with you about the art style. I think it looks beautiful. But Robert Beltran does not sound like Chakotay anymore, or at least he's not.
I noticed that, yeah.
He's not getting that out. And this is the second episode I've really noticed it in where you could probably get a sound-alike actor to do it better, unfortunately.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah, I haven't been thinking about it much because he's not really in the show that much, like on the whole, but yeah, you are right.
I have this feeling that he's going to become the centerpiece of season 2. That they're going to go to the future, and that's probably where season 2 is going to take place, and they're going to liberate Chakotay. But that's my theory.
Oh, that'd be so cool. Yeah, that's a good theory there, friend. I'd be up for that wholeheartedly.
I was wondering how long that time anomaly stuck around because it seemed like the Valnakat got a lot done between the time that the protostar showed up and the time that they went after it.
Yeah, yeah.
Like this thing was just there. Like how long has it been there?
I loved watching all the spaceships blow up in the time anomaly. Ah, it was so satisfying.
Yeah, I have like no sympathy for the Valnakat or the Order or whatever they want to call themselves. Not anymore.
Oh man, they killed themselves. Like
Yeah.
they didn't. Like they killed themselves pretty much, and I like that Gwen is fully against all of it. It's like, yes, we did this to ourselves. We could have just turned down the Federation or just joined them. Like it wasn't a big deal. Like we were all so upset at each other, we killed ourselves.
Yeah, you can't blame Starfleet for that. Well, they can, but you really can't. You're just a bunch of reactionaries on a revenge kick.
Totally. How did you feel about that, Vanessa?
About their grudge against Starfleet?
Yeah. Is it pretty like open-ended? Like that's dumb. Like
it's a weird framing of it. Like it's certainly a way you could frame it. It's sort of like a very convenient triangulation to sort of like point at an outside party that happened to possibly be involved and sort of blame them for your civil war. Like a civil war is civil. It doesn't really have anything to do with like an external thing, you know. So like being for or against Starfleet, that's sort of an internal issue. I'm not sure what Starfleet was meant to do. Like how better could they argue that joining the Federation is a good idea to the point where they would keep them from having civil war? And I would think that like Federation membership, you would have to like sort of comb that out first before you know, extending yourself into membership. Like you would have to like, you know, have I wouldn't say everybody is on board 100%, but you would at least have things, you know, settled to where you don't think you're going to have a civil war. Of course, you can't predict the future, but at least you would have a handle on the political situation enough to say, yeah, we're not going to just like try to kill each other because of this. I think that wasn't really that. I don't think that's a fair assessment on their part.
Yeah, I kind of felt like there was a parallel drawn with the pilot of Strange New Worlds. You know, I mean, what's the race in that one? The Kyrians? The one, Kyrians? The ones who like saw the whole thing. Huh? Yeah, the premiere where number one was kidnapped.
See, the thing is with that, Federation membership solved the problem, whereas with this, the Federation was the root of the problem, according to them.
But like after Pike went down and had his little speech, you know, like don't do what we did and so on. Like if they had still dissolved into civil war after that, was that because of what Pike did? I don't think so.
Yeah, I just really think when I imagine this, what was your question? Oh, okay. What do you think of the Prometheus class making first contact with the Valnakat? Wasn't that a bit heavy-handed? We saw how versatile that class in Voyager was in Voyager's Message in a Bottle.
Well, I don't think that's the exact same class as Message in a Bottle. It's just built off that idea.
I couldn't have told you what it was, so.
Yeah, it's like Kyria a second ago, and yeah, I totally agree with that too. I don't really think it's necessarily the same type of class.
Yeah, it's built off the design for sure.
Yeah, it's like got a design, but it's so much heavier on the firepower and everything. I would say, yeah. This is probably one of the more powerful ships we've seen in Star Trek history, I would say, if what they're saying is true. It's pretty vague on a lot of this stuff. As far as like some of the power they go into. If anybody has better stats than me. All right. How do we feel about Jankum Pog's story? We have not touched him yet. We shouldn't ever touch Jankum Pog.
I think it was the funniest of the stories and the most endearing out of all of them. It was
Absolutely.
a lot of fun.
Yeah.
But everybody else's story seemed to be about their pain. And I mean, he did go through some pain for sure, but it was definitely the lightest of anybody. It was a touch and go fun bunch of moments.
Well, I mean, it kind of is the lightest, and it isn't, because like he suffers so much physical damage like during all of it. If you watch him doing it, he like gets like knocked around ship like constantly.
Oh, hey, Eve.
Hello, Eve. Thank you for joining us.
Eve.
I did like how it started, though. You just get this random piece of space debris, and apparently there's no shields of any kind on the ship, probably because it's... Oh, yeah, because it's like 200 years old. They don't really have that shield technology, do they?
Yeah.
Yeah. So it like just hits part of the ship, and the hull like decompresses a little bit, and it starts shaking, and it makes a wrench fall and open up his pod. I was like, okay, so he was essentially Rube Goldberg'd awake.
Yeah, and why are they in a deep sleep for so long? I do not remember that at all.
I think it was just
the
way the Tellarites were
Dan is saying that it's been
official.
Okay, Dan is saying that it's been officially referred to as a Prometheus clash that makes first contact with the Vonnegut.
Fair enough.
Yeah. All right, then. What were you saying, Dustin? I'm so sorry.
I don't know. What were we talking about? I totally
It was because it was so long ago. And,
yeah.
Jenkum, his exposition was how, like the Tellarites apparently take orphans and put them on deep space missions.
Yeah, it's just a thing that the Tellarites were doing. I guess they sent them to all over the galaxy.
Oh my word, what a society.
So I guess everybody has that in common, that like, except for Gwen, nobody really knows who their parents are, it seems.
Yeah. And
go ahead,
Dustin, please.
The only thing I didn't get about the Jankum story was at the end, like, why couldn't he just repair the oxygen recycler or something? And that's the last thing he did. That didn't make a whole lot of sense to me. Like, oh, there's just enough oxygen for everybody but you.
Yeah, teeny bit contrived. Also, he knew his name. How did he not know the origin of his name? Because back in Crossroads, he was talking to Noom, and Noom's like, yeah, we call Tellarites Pog because they're short. He didn't know that. Like he knew his name. He said his name enough times. And I do think that like having to say his name to Boxy so many times is like why he keeps referring to himself in the third person.
I loved that robot. I love that robot so much. I like Star Trek tech is always so compliant and advanced and no issues. And I love that there is something so buggy and ridiculous and like repetitive and bad. Like this software is in the alpha stage at best. So I felt his frustration.
When Jankum gave that whole speech at the end, and like the Pog just the robot just couldn't even remember, like it just completely gone. Like, oh my word, I busted up so hard. That was one of the
It reminded me of the
Robot
Voyager
5 seconds earlier.
It reminded me of the Voyager episode Flesh and Blood, when the Rogue Hollows commandeer these really simple basic holograms that only have a couple of functions and they just can't understand.
Sure.
I like the Tellarites and the Medusans sending younglings out to the galaxy kind of reminded me of the Founders. Sort of, because the Founders, they just sort of like stuck you in a bottle and pushed you out the window, and wherever you landed, that's where you ended up. Whereas with this, they had more of a deliberate reason to be out there. Not to say that Pog being in a chamber is like better, but at least he's not just like floating in a ship in a bottle or message in a bottle. Founder in a bottle.
That police song "Message in a Bottle" has been running through my head this entire time.
Oh yeah.
Yeah,
the police fan, Scotty. Are we allowed to refer to you as Scotty?
Go nuts.
Awesome.
I didn't know that anybody do that except my family. So.
Okay, well, I won't be too hard on it then.
Ooh, good point.
A lot of things are better than what happened to Icheb, especially towards the end. Oh my god.
Isn't
Forgive
it
me.
possible that Pog became known as the Runts during the interim that Pog was in cryosleep?
That's a good point, Dan.
I honestly thought that Tellarite on that planet before, they were giving chase to the Prodigy crew, I thought he was honestly being a jerk. I don't necessarily think that Pog necessarily means short. I really think he was just being mean, because Tellarites are mean. They like to banter meanly. That's the way they talk to each other.
Yeah.
I don't see it as a big thing, because I mean, like, I'm sure my name means something if I look it up in English, but I don't know what it means. I just see it as something like that.
Good points all around. Oh, well, I did not know that, Dan. Thank you. Bad names until you prove yourself worthy. I'm so sorry, Eve. I'm so sorry.
Wait, what was that?
That was Eve who said that. I attributed that to Dan. That was, sorry. All right. I'm trying to think of what else we really have to cover.
We got a few more
Couple of
questions.
questions here.
Sorry, I wasn't able to find the script. If you got some more, please
Should
go
be
ahead.
under the private chat tab.
So why is there an active arboretum on the ship whose crew has been asleep for at least 2 centuries?
Mm-hmm. Talk about using up oxygen.
Yeah, that's weird.
It
Well,
creates
wouldn't that
oxygen.
create oxygen?
Oh, right.
That's
yeah.
why I
Okay,
thought it was
yeah.
there, because it created oxygen.
Yeah, that makes
That's
a lot
why
of
I
sense.
asked this question.
Yeah.
I knew somebody would come up with a really great idea of why.
Yeah, that makes so much sense now. I was like
Yeah.
scratching my
Well,
head.
maybe Pog could have planted more trees in order to stay there. Not sure where he would get them, but
Um,
go to Home Depot.
I don't want to make it like too harsh, but is Jankum waking up sort of an Austin Powers situation? Because they talk about the toilet like getting messed up, and I'm like,
Yeah, baby.
He's the only person on the ship. Who else is messing up the toilet?
I thought that too.
Right?
Yeah, like I thought about that for a good minute. Like, he must be the one messing up the toilet. To have some living things also for when they wake up. Yeah, that's a good idea. To have some things, to cook on, I guess.
I thought about that at first, but I mean, they've literally been asleep for 200 years. That seems like an awful waste to keep that stuff growing automatically for that amount of time. But
Totally.
And who's going to maintain it? Just the robot, I guess. And obviously the robot, robot's so funny, because it's like, it's the only like functioning piece of machinery, no problem. But it's like, except for the fact that it's not very complicated or able to cogitate very well. But like, what's function does it have other than yelling at Pog, honestly?
And
I feel like that robot is very Wall-E in a sense. The Pixar film, if anyone isn't familiar with it. Yeah, and yeah, it's so like atmospheric on a certain level and vaudevillian. Like maybe like a silent film comedy is a better way to put that. Eve is saying he's part Bolin. Janeway made comments how they didn't find Earth plumbing adequate.
they take massive dumps.
Well, thank you for coming out with it for us.
It was.
I'm glad you have the courage to say what others will not.
Well, there's been several indications about how the Bolians. It's been alluded to anyway a few times.
right.
I just hoped everybody's waste got beamed out of their body. Like there's no expulsion of anything. You never hear about anybody going to the bathroom. Everybody poops, but where's the bathroom?
Yes.
On like TNG, did anybody go, I gotta go,
Yeah.
Never. So I think to up work efficiency and make it so that someone could be on like night shift and not have to get up, just beam it out.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think they have waste reclamators. That's something that came up in like an early episode of Enterprise. Like they were answering, questions from kids back on Earth, and Trip had to explain how they reclaimed their waste.
Dan is saying Boxy reminds him of the Discovery robots.
Oh, the dots.
Yeah. I like the Discovery robots. They look cool. At least I think so.
Like, whose backstory do you enjoy the most?
Do I personally enjoy the most? I guess it's a tie between Jank and Pog and the Medusan. I found the Medusan very captivating because I probably enjoy visual storytelling more than anything, and just having this whole segment where you see them like roaming free and just being alive, and they're evolved beyond like the necessities of having identity, like beyond like expressing it in a way that is like a pack mentality or something like that. Like they're gravitated towards each other because they know that's how they, that's who they are and what they do.
Oh, that's right. Thanks, Dan.
Thank you, Dan. And with Jank and Pog, I just felt like it was good physical humor, and I felt like he kind of earned his little spot at the end of it, and it felt bad to see him like get pulled up into that. I thought like maybe he was gonna go free for a minute, but no, it's just like him stuck in that ship, and then he gets taken away. It's really existential on a certain level. I love that so much.
For me, I think it's a tie between Rock Talk's story because I love the character of Rock Talk. She's amazing. Yeah. It's a tie between that and the Diviner for me.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, Rock Talk is like really great. I really enjoyed there's no dialogue between her and the Knight, but they communicate effortlessly, and that was beautiful from a show not tell filmmaking perspective.
Mm-hmm.
Scott?
I wish they would have talked about Doll a little bit more, because we haven't really heard about. Know that he doesn't have like parents technically, but what was his childhood like? Like we didn't for some reason get illuminated, unless it's been explained in an earlier episode. It's completely wiped from my mind. It's like it was sort of like, oh, we've all shared ourselves. It's like, wait, Doll hasn't really.
Yeah, I mean, there was it was somewhat in like First Contact, but that doesn't explain how, Damon Nindy got a hold of him in the first place. Since he was clearly created in a lab, how do you wind up in, the hands of a Ferengi?
I think maybe they also only had so much time to tell so many stories. We do have quite a few characters here. I'm thinking this is only maybe a 21 episode season, or is this these?
I mean, that's twice as long as, what we've been getting. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Like usually it's a 10 episode season now on streaming with new Kurtzman tracks. So it's like you're getting twice as long to tell Doll's story. And maybe there's a reason that they're not telling it yet, but it just stuck out to me that Doll's story kind of remains a mystery in terms of like his upbringing. Like what informs his values. That's sort of like what a backstory does, like sort of contextualizes their personality a little bit. So we know why Rock Talk doesn't like fighting. Mm-hmm. We know, we have a sense of who these people are in a more three-dimensional way. I really enjoyed Jankum Pog being a trainee and just kind of being thrown into having to do all these major repairs. And like it's sort of spiraled out like, oh, I fixed this one thing, but then this other thing is getting the odd treatment.
Huh?
What does that mean?
Would you like
part of a bigger arc? Yeah, okay, that's what I thought. That's what I'm guessing. But it seems obvious, a little obvious that they skipped him in this episode.
One thing I did like about Rock's story was her whole thing with her and the Knight. Like, there's this like not chemistry, but there's clearly this connection between them because, like she said, they couldn't communicate apart from one or two words, but they both played their role as like hero and monster perfectly when they're performing. And then in the middle of a performance, I I think she was the one who like made the conscious decision to make it a comedy, and he immediately picks up on it and rolls with it. It was beautiful.
Yeah, it was very yes and.
Dan has an awesome question that ties in with this, but I want to ask another one that's on our list first. Does this mean that lightsabers are now canon in Star Trek? With the Knight's
laser sword,
light up sword.
I for one am not saying that whatsoever.
I thought it was a toy.
2022.
Yeah, it doesn't seem to cause actual damage, and whether that's because Rock Talk is, you know, a Brakar or because it's not actually meant to, we don't know yet. But I mean, it does kind of have the same thing, you know, you can whoosh with it, and and it doesn't whoosh.
Dan here is also
let her play with it, and she's a kid.
Yeah. He's asking did anyone else feel that Rock Talk's backstory felt a bit forced? We already sympathized with her over the treatment at Tara Lamora, but they keep making her backstory really sad.
It is a little weird that, like, apparently she was saying back in the day that, like, all she ever ate was Nutrigoop, and apparently that's all she ever ate, period, no matter where she was.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah, she has a real intense.
I don't think she was necessarily as, like, I think the story is sad to us. I don't think it's necessarily sad to her. She seemed to, like, walk away from that story as though, you know, hey, I actually was able to sort of empower myself towards the end of my, you know, tenure with that. But, you know, I don't really, I would see somebody that both innocent and monstrously large as somebody having a story like that and being exploited. Absolutely. So
right.
I didn't really think of it as something that was sort of shoehorned in to make us cry. I didn't. I actually think that she walked away from that experience and shared wisdom gleaned from it. That, like, I don't think it was necessarily, like, meant to be a sad story. I think it was meant to show us that, like, opinions of people are really hard to change, and, you know, people will judge you by your looks, and I think that's a thing kids can connect with. Absolutely.
Yeah.
I would just take it as Travis Mayweather and Miles O'Brien before her. Somebody must suffer.
Right.
God bless Miles O'Brien, though. I love him like I love my father. Well, maybe I probably love him more than I love my father. I'm sorry, everybody.
I mean, she was, like, exploited, obviously, but she didn't really frame it that way. She was just like, we just sort of played this role over and over again. And at one point I, you know, it was fun and I got my goop and we hung out afterwards and it was cool. But at some point I tried to, like, connect with other people and realize that they saw me as the heel, the same as in the arena. So let's switch it up. And she did. And that didn't work out. So, you know, trying to change people's perception of her just backfired because it just wasn't as profitable. So she sort of, like, it sort of became much clearer exactly to what degree she was being exploited. To her, this was sort of like playtime.
Right.
Yeah.
You know.
Dan is saying that he found it interesting that Janeway is listening to Chopin's Prelude number 4 at the start of the episode, and the episode contains 4 preludes of the Protostar crew. Excellent observation, Dan. Thank you so much for contributing. I'd been wanting to mention something about that because I think it's one of the first times in Prodigy we really see people engaging in the type of classical music that we are fond of throughout Star Trek history.
I thought it was a nice little callback to the Voyager episode Counterpoint.
Oh. How'd you feel about that, Vanessa?
I didn't notice that.
Oh, you didn't even think about it. Wow.
That's true.
I thought that'd be a snobby thing you'd want to point out, like, look at them, bringing the classical music back.
Woo!
Sorry.
It's okay. Okay.
I think the only question that's left is the one Dan mentioned about it being meandering.
Yeah, that's what I was just looking at.
Mhm.
But now, who even cares about the crew? The storyline is so ridiculously meandering, right?
I cares about this crew.
Yeah, I feel okay about the crew. I mean,
Yeah.
I will watch them do stuff. I will not personally build my own ship and go out and get involved in their shenanigans, but I am involved in watching them at least on a weekly basis.
I think it's fairly straightforward. They've been in the neutral zone. They're sort of marooned there. And we have just enough plot for this episode to justify his existence beyond the backstory.
Right.
Because now Janeway is aware of the real situation without having to contact the protostar, and knows who she's dealing with the diviner, but might be too little too late, because she ends up at the end of the episode getting knocked out. So
Would you put up your previous observation, Dan, about the song being used? Chopin's Prelude No. 4 was also in The Measure of a Man, and that's a great call. Thank you, Dan. Personally, I really value having a moment of respite in a show aimed at younger viewers. I think it shows maturity for a animated show aimed at younger viewers to be willing to let scenes breathe. Dan saying absolutely love this show. It was a completely snarky question. I guess he means snarky. So yeah, I guess we weren't meant to take that one too seriously.
Tone is lost in text. It was weird. Like, I don't know. Dan plays the straight man very, very effectively. So I can't tell sometimes.
He's a real Laurel.
Is that Janeway's second in command?
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, I love the
I love his
between
voice.
the two of them.
Who is that?
Yes,
David Diggs.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, that makes a lot of sense.
Lafayette and Thomas Jefferson in Hamilton.
Nice.
And I'll tell you what else he reminds me of. He reminds me of like one of the aliens from Macross, like the way they look. They have a very sharp face, and sometimes they have like this blue and green hues to them. It's really
heck yeah, the Zentradi.
And
Okay.
And he's in a rap group called Clipping.
Oh,
it's pretty good. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So I was like, that voice sounds familiar. That was really cool that they managed to get him.
Had no clue. That's awesome. Thank you, Vanessa.
Okay, I got a question that wasn't on here. And if there's something I'm missing because I haven't done all my Voyager homework, just bear with me. So the Kazon are a running thread through all of the backstories. They're the ones who've been basically, I guess it seems like they're working for the diviner, just, selling him children. How did they know how to capture a Medusan? Like, they had special eyewear on. They had spears that were able to neutralize Zero. A box that the box wasn't that surprising, but like, seriously, they're aliens of the Delta Quadrant. How did they know how to capture a Medusan?
I guess they learned from the diviner. I guess he knew and brought his knowledge with him. I don't know. It's weird.
I would think that this was a contract. This looked very planned to the extent that they were chasing it out of one place in order to cut it off at one point and then push it into the box. So, and they had the glasses and everything. So they looked very prepared and very strategic about what they were doing and how they were going to capture this guy. So I have to imagine that the diviner briefed them on how to capture this guy. So,
right.
I bet they do that the way people the way people move furniture or something, just like another day on the job, putting my suit on, gonna get these weird energy beams. It's gonna be a good time.
I'm also kind of glad that they steered away from depicting the Kazon as being less than goofballs. They seem kind of like goofy to me on Voyager. I don't know, like not a bunch of collection of characters that I take too seriously.
Right. Dan said a second ago that it's not dealt with at all on Voyager. So yeah, I guess we probably shouldn't even worry about that too much on a whole.
You should actually be past them entirely now in your watch, Scott.
They're completely gone by the beginning of season 3?
Yep.
Oh, wow. Okay.
You never see him again until it's brought up in Lower Decks with the, oh, Kazon! And then now, where they... Here's a question. Are the Kazon now the new humans of Prodigy's galaxy? Because we see them as ubiquitously as we've seen human-like characters in other Star Treks.
I prefer that with Prodigy. I'm glad we don't have a whole bunch of just regular looking dudes hanging around. We have full interesting designs for everyone.
Maybe they figured out how to unite all the sects.
Dan says not really. I don't know what exactly that is referring to, Dan. I'm so sorry.
Are you asking if like the Kazon are the majority?
We're just seeing so many of them. They've been the most ubiquitous background character that we've seen the most of in Prodigy.
Mm-hmm. Oh. So they're like the majority in the Gamma Quadrant, maybe. But yeah, one example in Kazon returning later, and Voyager is in Shattered. Yeah.
Oh, that's a good point. They do show up in that like time loop.
Would anyone remind me how present they are in Shattered? I cannot recall that episode at all.
Was that the one where like all the ship was like living in a different reality depending on which part of it you were in?
Mm-hmm. Chakotay is walking through all of them.
Yeah.
And yeah, he goes back to a time when during Basics when the Kazon had taken over the ship.
Thank you. Great example, Dan. I really appreciate you bringing that up. Added a lot to our conversation.
Sorry for the spoilers, Scott.
I'm fine.
Scott. It's okay. You're going to find out eventually.
Because I love sci-fi episodes where they mess with time.
I just think their hair looks like morel mushrooms. And I'm not sure like the hair that they depicted on Prodigy was as morel-like. That's the only quibble I have with the character design.
The original Kazon hair was made out of dog toys and sponges.
It was a pet
mutilated Fozzie Bear.
Oh yeah, Fozzie Bear. That makes a lot of sense when you say that. They are Waka Waka. Oh, Dan's saying it's a little bit twisted.
Well, the episode that we were talking about is a little bit like the episode Twisted.
Okay.
It's similar.
Okay. Forgive me.
Scott has probably seen the one where the ship gets all twisted up and they keep walking in circles. It's similar to that, but add a time component to it, and that's the episode.
I'm doing the best I can with questions at the bottom. I'm kind of a little bit away from my PC. It's awkward.
Yeah, we're out of regular questions, so if anybody else has anything.
Dan is saying, I love seeing a Catian again. And I do too. I like him popping up. Cation. I'm sorry.
It's okay.
I like saying the word cat.
It's
not like you can hear it out loud.
I can't get them all.
Right?
No, I can't. Thank you. I appreciate it. I'm trying to think of, I think most of my points got put across. I can't really think of anything else I need to say at this point.
Yep.
So how many rank pips out of 5 would you rank this episode?
I'm giving it 4. It's more than solid of an episode. I think maybe some of the some of the backstory gets a little arduous, like here and there in small places, because it's like we got to kind of rush through this stuff, and we don't get greater details that enhance these stories. But at the same time, I don't really think it's that big of a deal. I don't think it gets in the way of my pleasure of it. It's pretty minor criticism. For this series, I would even go so far as to say like a 5 out of 5 if we're just thinking about what the show has accomplished so far, because I think the fact that showing it can play subtle moments as well as other Star Trek series before it is a real advantage it has. Like, it's going to help it live better later on through the years.
Rob, your mic gain just like tripled.
Really, it's weird. I'm so sorry. Let me try to do something about that. Okay.
Go ahead, Scott, though.
Yeah, I will actually give it a 5 out of 5. I love the anthology aspect where, get a bunch of different stories being told. I actually love that the Valnacat are basically irredeemable because they've literally brought this whole thing upon themselves. Love that. I love the way that it flowed with the episode because we knew they needed some downtime to, fix the engines up. Oh, what do we do? We'll tell stories. Really, the only tiniest nitpick was what you said, Dustin, about why Jenkem had to leave his sleeper ship in the first place. But yeah, that doesn't really take away that much from me. So I think this is almost the first time I've done 5 out of 5 on an episode.
Oh, awesome. Eve is saying 4 pips. Maybe she'd like to expound upon that. Dan is giving it 4 pips. And Dustin, would you like to go?
Dustin, you're muted.
You're muted, friend.
Thank you. I will give it 4 pips also. I think there's some room for improvement because, like most Prodigy, there's a lot of those little convenience moments that we talked about today that keep it from being the perfect episode. But what I would say is I think it's the most poignant episode yet of Prodigy.
Vanessa?
I would give it like a 4.5. I really enjoy that, we're not just being flung from set piece to set piece, and at the same time expected to be emotionally invested in these characters over the long term. We have a moment of respite where we can, as Rob said, check in with the characters and, see how they ended up in this place, because, what makes a fully rounded character is that they lived before all of this stuff happened. So to see what may have informed their choices and why Rock Talk isn't really super into fighting, I think is a really valuable key information to sort of, if Dahl had more story, it would be 5. Same. I really enjoyed the sort of raising of stakes with Janeway being knocked out. I'm really curious as to how that ship's crew is going to handle all that. If they're going to handle that, is the Diviner going to take over the gosh darn it, what's the name of that one? That
Dauntless.
ship? Dauntless. Take over the Dauntless. And are they going to catch up with the Protostar now that the engine is fixed? So it's pushed things forward enough to make it still interesting, and there's still plot there, and there's still character development there. And I really enjoyed also the Diviner sort of catching on to his old mindset. You could sort of see him sort of jogging his own memory about his rationalization for the things that he does, which was really interesting. And
very interesting.
Yeah. To sort of get fed the sort of propaganda that Essentia is feeding him, and he's like, oh yeah, that's why we're on this mission. So anyway, I think it's a solid 4.5. Absolutely. Dahl would have made it a 5.
Yeah. I believe that's all we have time for today. Thanks to the panelists for joining our discussion. We hope you, our viewers, have enjoyed it. Please remember to like and subscribe the video, and we'll see you next time on Subspace Chatter. Trek you later.